Next, we're going to review the anatomy of the hearing and balance structures. So the anatomy of the ear. This is the ear that we can see from the outside. This is referred to as the auricle or pinna. Okay, so the auricle or pinna is that part of the ear that is made out of cartilage and a little bit of fatty connective tissue at the earlobe, covered with skin, of course, and it's very flexible. It's made out of elastic cartilage. The ear hole leads to an ear canal. This ear canal is known as the auditory canal or external auditory meatus. Meatus means like a tube. This external auditory meatus leads to a structure at the end called the eardrum or tympanic membrane. The ear canal is actually located inside of the temporal bone. And inside the temporal bone, there's a special cavity known as the middle ear cavity. It contains the small structures known as the inner ear. So the middle ear cavity is located inside of the temporal bone. You can see it's like a spongy temporal bone right here. And so the ear canal gets to that middle ear, there's going to be a complete cover enclosing that chamber. It is a flexible membrane called the tympanic membrane or the eardrum. So this is the membrane that can vibrate as the sound waves enter the ear canal. They can strike this membrane and vibrate it, and that's the first part of the sound generation. The eardrum on its deeper side or posterior side is connected to these orange, highlighted in orange. Obviously, everything is not colorful like this in the real ear, but it's connected to these little tiny bones. There's 3 of them. They're called malleus, incus, and stapes. These little bones are referred to as the ossicles. That means little bones. Malleus, incus, and stapes. So the eardrum is connected to the malleus, also known as the hammer. The malleus is connected to the incus, also known as the anvil. And incus is connected to the stapes. Kind of looks like a staple in a way, so it's easy to remember this one, stapes. Okay, malleus, incus, and stapes. They're located in the middle ear cavity. And malleus, incus, and stapes are connected to each other in a chain. So when the tympanic membrane vibrates, it transfers its vibrations to the malleus. Malleus knocks on the incus. Incus vibrates the stapes. And the stapes vibrates a special tympanic membrane. It's covered by this incus that is located in this purple structure. This purple structure is known as the inner ear. So this is also made out of little bones. So this is a bony structure. And it kind of looks like a snail because it's got this shell. It's got like the body of the snail and 3 loop circular antennas in a way. So the shell of the snail is known as the cochlea. Okay, the body of the snail-shaped structure is known as the vestibule. And the 3 loops at the top of the vestibule are known as the semicircular canals or ducts. This structure is actually hollow inside. So if you open it, there's going to be space. That space is filled with liquid, and it also contains special sensory receptors known as the hair cells. These hair cells detect sound vibrations. So as the sound waves enter the ear canal, they vibrate the eardrum. The vibrations are transferred to the malleus, to the incus, to the stapes, then into the cochlea. The liquid inside of the cochlea vibrates. It travels through this long it travels through this long canal of the cochlea in a spiral motion, and it vibrates the liquid inside of it. Inside of that liquid, there's going to be special hair cells. I'm going to show you the picture of them. Where is it? So vision. Let's get to the hearing. Oh, whoops. Sorry about that. So here we go. Physiology. Here's the hair cells. These are cells with hairs on top of them inside of our ears. So when the liquid inside of the cochlea vibrates, it stimulates the movement of these hairs. Okay. And this diagram kind of shows that a little bit more detailed. So the sound vibrates the eardrum, that descends to the malleus, then to the incus, then to the stapes, then it vibrates through the tympanic membrane. That vibrates the liquid inside of the cochlea. That liquid is vibrating, and that activates the hair cells that are located on the side of the cochlear structures. Okay, so back to this. So each hair cell is connected by the nerves to the brain, and this is the part of the nerve visible that connects these hair cells to the brain. It's known as the cochlear nerve. So it connects the hair cells from the cochlea to the brain, and this is called the cochlear nerve. So that's how hearing is produced. So once again, the sound waves enter the ear canal, vibrate tympanic membrane, vibrate malleus, incus, stapes, vibrate the liquid inside of the cochlea. That moves the hairs on the hair cells. The hair cells produce the action potential that travels through the cochlear nerve to the brain, and we hear a sound. So that is going to be the physiology of sound. There's going to be other structures inside of the ear. Inside of the middle ear cavity, there is actually a tube known as the auditory tube or eustachian tube, and this tube leads actually to the throat. So do this little experiment right now. So pinch your nose tight closed, and now gently blow air into your nose until you feel your ears popping. So what you did was you pushed the air into the nose, but there was nowhere for the air to go. So the air went through these auditory tubes into the middle ear, and it pushed on the eardrum from the inside, and it made that sound of like fullness inside of the ear, feeling of that fullness inside of the ear and popping. So I'm going to show you a picture of the eustachian tubes in a different view because it's not easy to see them from here. So here's a very cool picture of the eustachian tube. So this is the ear canal, the eardrum. This is the middle ear. You can see everything is located inside of the temporal bone. These are the inner ear structures, and this is the eustachian tube leading to actually the back of the nose. This picture kind of shows like it's going into the nostril, but that's not correct. Here, that's a little bit better, so you can see a little bit more of a projection. So auditory canal, eardrum, middle ear, these ossicles in the middle ear, and this is the eustachian tube. It's going to be connected to the nasopharynx. So that space, if you envision that space in the back of your mouth, but if you're going to kind of like go up to the nose, so it's like in that space right above this uvula, this little teardrop shape structure hanging in the back of the mouth. So if you kind of go behind it and up, so that's where eustachian tubes will connect. They're also connected by the muscle, these eustachian tubes, and this muscle helps to actually open up this eustachian tube and regulate the pressure inside of the middle ear. So when the pressure outside of the ear changes, like for example, we're going up in elevation, the pressure getting lower, the eustachian tube can open up a little bit more and let some air inside to regulate, to equalize the pressure between the two sides of the eardrum and help us hear better. These muscles also help to kind of like muffle the sound of chewing. So as we're chewing, it doesn't sound too loud. Okay. So how do I go back to my presentation? So where is that presentation? special senses. Okay, so eustachian tube. Okay, and the last part, oh, by the way, this is how ear infections happen. So the infections can get into the eustachian tube from the nose and mouth and cause an infection of the middle ear, the same way infections happen of the sinuses, for example. That happens in children a lot more often than adults. And last part that I wanted to mention is we didn't talk about the structures of the vestibule of this shape and the semicircular canal. So the vestibule is continuous with the cochlea, and the semicircular canals is also continuous with the cavity inside of this structure. It's also filled with liquid, and there's going to be also hair cells in the vestibule, except those hair cells are not going to be responding too much to the sound waves. Instead, these hair cells respond better to movement. And when we move our body, for example, we turn our head to the side, like left and right, or we go upside down, the liquid inside of these structures inside of the vestibule and semicircular canal is going to start moving because we're moving. Okay, a good example of that will be spinning around in circles. Okay, so spinning around in circles will really get this liquid inside of our inner ear going really fast, and when we stop, the liquid will still be moving for a little while, and we're going to feel like we're still spinning. Okay, this is called like a vertigo. So what the structures in the vestibule do, they actually provide us with a sense of balance and orientation in space. So these hair cells in the vestibule, they're also connected to the brain, but through a different set of neurons. You can see a separate nerve. It's called the vestibular nerve, and it connects the hair cells in the vestibule to the brain and provides us with a sense of balance. So I wanted to go back to this presentation and just show you a little bit more of the physiology of balance. So here's how it works. So the hair cells in a vestibule, they're covered by special crystals. They're called otoliths. And with these otoliths, they shift because of gravity or movement, and that shifts the hairs of the hair cells, and we feel our body moving. So we can actually close our eyes and move our head in different directions, and we can still feel that because of these hair cells in our inner ear. Okay, kind of like this. So you can see the person moving their head. So these hair cells are moving together with our body. Okay, and that is called a sense of balance. So a dysfunction of this vestibular apparatus can cause a permanent vertigo. Of course, we can cause vertigo in our own body by just spinning in circles and then stop, and then you're going to feel like your head is spinning. That sensation goes away after a while, but people who suffer from vertigo, that sensation kind of like stays on for a while without having to spin. So it makes people, of course, feel like the objects around them are moving, makes them unstable, causes nausea, vomiting, sweating, difficulty walking, not surprisingly. Okay, so that's called the vertigo. And the last thing I wanted to show you about the sense of hearing and sense of balance is this cochlear implant. So cochlear implants, sometimes people are born without the ability to hear, and that is usually because the hair cells inside of the cochlea are not functioning. So that could actually be somewhat corrected, or these people can get help with a cochlear implant. So what it is that it's an actual implant. So it's a surgical procedure to place an artificial cochlea into the middle ear, and that artificial cochlea contains, it's an internal implant that converts signals into electrical energy that stimulates the nerve, the cochlear nerve, and the brain perceives signals, and the person could hear sound. Of course, that sound is not perfect, but at least it allows the person to understand the direction of the sound, the intensity of the sound, and sometimes get some clarity on what the words might be. And this cochlear implant actually communicates with an external device. It's basically a microphone that receives. So this is the internal implant. this thing right here. It's basically a microphone that captures the sounds and sends them to the cochlea, and it through this wire thingy. Okay, so that's called a cochlear implant. Okay, so let's see if we missed anything. So the structures of the ear are divided into 3 sections. External ear, this is going to be the pinna, the external auditory meatus, and a tympanic membrane. Behind the tympanic membrane, we're going to have middle ear, this highlighted in blue cavity. Contains the ossicles, the malleus, incus, and stapes, and eustachian tube. And it contains the structures of the inner ear, and inner ear is made out of cochlea, vestibule, semicircular canals. There's 3 of them, and the vestibular cochlear nerve. The nerve is called vestibular cochlear because it actually looks like one nerve that travels into the brain, but it's made out of 2 parts. The cochlear part is the part that travels from the cochlea, and vestibular nerve is the part that carries sensations from the vestibule.